Welcome to the Deep Dive. We're here to explore complex topics, aiming to give you, well, greater clarity and confidence in understanding them.
That's the goal.
And today, we're diving into something really significant, something impacting millions across the UK. We're talking about recent major announcements from the DWP, the Department for Work and Pensions.
Big news.
Yeah, about a huge overhaul of the welfare system, specifically personal independence payment, or PIP, and also universal credit.
Right.
And look, these aren't just minor tweaks, are they? They seem to represent pretty fundamental reshaping of how millions get support.
Absolutely. It's a shift with potentially profound human implications. You mentioned the UN report. We'll definitely touch on that later. It highlights the human side of all this.
Exactly. It's a complex landscape, no doubt about it, but our mission today is to help you navigate it.
That's right. We really want to explore these proposed changes thoroughly. We're drawing directly from the official government green papers, independent analyses too, and some really valuable insights from places like Citizen Advice Services.
Good sources.
Yeah, the aim is to pull out the most important bits of information, clarify what these reforms could genuinely mean for you, for all residents in the UK, with a qualifying right to reside, actually. Cut through the noise and get to the core.
Okay, let's unpack this then straight away. The DWP is certainly making a lot of noise about reforming the welfare system. Why now? What are the main reasons they're actually giving for these really big changes?
Well, the government's stated goals are pretty clear, really. They want to, quote, get Britain working and put the whole welfare system on what they call a sustainable footing.
Right, sustainable footing.
Right.
What does that actually mean in practice? Costs.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, a major driver here is the soaring cost of incapacity and disability benefits. Just think about this. Since the pandemic, spending it's shot up by an astonishing $20 billion.
$20 billion. Wow.
And it's forecasted to hit over $70 billion in just 5 years.
Goodness.
To give you some perspective on that, that's more than a third of the current NHS budget.
Right.
And over 3 times what the UK currently spends on policing. It's a truly immense sum of public money we're talking about.
That is a staggering figure. So when the DWP talks about this sustainable footing, what are they pointing to as the specific drivers for that increase? Is it just more people claiming?
That's a huge part of it, yes. The DWP points directly to a significant rise in claims. Take new PIP awards, for instance. Before the pandemic, it was around 13,000 per month.
Yeah.
Now, it's 34,000 per month.
Doubled, and then some.
Exactly. And if you look ahead, the number of people on working age PIP, it's projected to more than double again by the end of this decade. We could be looking at over 4 million people.
4 million.
And the cost associated with that, we're talking nearly $35 billion a year by 2029-30. That kind of figure puts immense pressure on national finances, far exceeding what many other major public services get.
So where's that rise coming from? More people with health conditions?
It seems strongly linked, yes. There's a growing prevalence of long-term health conditions. About 36% of the working age population are now affected.
Wow, over a third.
Yeah, and that's up from 29% just a decade ago. Mental health conditions in particular are a leading factor. They've increased from making up 18% of the main conditions for claims to 25% over that same period.
Okay, so we're definitely seeing more people living with long-term conditions, which, naturally leads to more claims. But the government's rhetoric also suggests this concern about employment rates among claimants. What's the picture there?
Yes. That's the other key part of their argument. Despite this rise in claims, the employment rates for people on these benefits remain, remarkably low.
How low?
Less than 1% of people on the universal credit health element actually enter employment each month.
Less than 1%, right.
And only about 17% of people getting PIP are in work. The UK is actually described in some reports as an international outlier because of this rapid increase in disability benefit spending compared to similar countries.
An outlier.
Yeah. And the government's green paper, it explicitly argues the current system stifles aspiration, and it even calls it broken.
That's strong language, isn't it? Stifles aspiration, broken.
Yeah.
From the independent analyses you mentioned, do they see it differently? Are there other factors maybe contributing to that low employment rate beyond just the benefit structure itself?
Well, it's really important to remember these are the government's stated reasons, right?
Sure.
Independent analyses often paint a much more complex picture. They highlight systemic barriers, things like, lack of accessible workplaces, maybe employer attitudes, insufficient support services. They argue it's not just the benefit system causing low employment.
Okay, so a more nuanced view there.
Definitely. But the government's position, the one driving these reforms, is that the current structure does disincentivize work, and that's why they're proposing these changes.
Right. Okay, so given these huge pressures, the cost, the employment figures, and the government's rationale, what are the direct impacts looking like for PIP itself, particularly thinking about eligibility and how people will be assessed in the future?
This is really a critical point, and it feels like a fundamental shift in philosophy, almost.
How so?
A key proposed change is a new additional eligibility requirement specifically for the daily living component of PIP.
Okay, what is it?
Moving forward, you'd have to score a minimum of 4 points on one specific daily living activity to get that element of the benefit.
Just one. So, hang on. If someone has, say, several difficulties, maybe scoring 3 points on a few different things, but never hitting 4 points on any single one, they could lose that part of PIP.
That's exactly the potential impact, yes. It shifts away from looking at the cumulative weight of various struggles, how lots of smaller things add up towards really prioritizing singular, highly concentrated needs. So it could mean many individuals with complex conditions, but maybe varied challenges, might no longer qualify for that daily living component, even if their overall disability burden is still high, just because their points are spread out.
And the stated aim for that
The
is?
stated aim is to focus support on those with higher needs. That's the official line.
That certainly sounds like a significant tightening of who might qualify. Like you say, someone with multiple smaller difficulties that add up to a big impact could be really affected. What else is on the table for PIP assessments more broadly? Anything else changing there?
Well, the DWP also plans a thorough review of the entire PIP assessment process.
Okay.
This comes after a recent consultation where they floated some, well, pretty radical ideas.
Such as?
Things like replacing cash payments, the money people receive now, with alternatives. They suggested vouchers, catalogs, maybe having to show receipts, or even just getting one-off grants instead of regular payments.
Wow. Okay. That sounds like a massive change to how people manage their support. How did those ideas go down?
The public response was pretty clear and decisive. Overwhelmingly negative, actually.
Really?
Oh, yeah. For example, something like 92% of organizations completely rejected the idea of vouchers.
92%.
Yeah. The main concerns were that schemes like that would fundamentally remove people's autonomy, their ability to choose how to meet their own needs. There were also worries about stigmatizing people, making the whole thing overly bureaucratic, and just being unsuitable for the ongoing, often variable expenses that long-term conditions bring.
So the feeling was people know best how to spend their own support money.
Pretty much, yeah. People generally feel they know best how to manage their own lives and the support they need.
Did anything positive come out of that consultation? Any areas of agreement?
Yes, actually, it wasn't all opposition. There was definitely support for some ideas. For instance, the idea that claimants with specific stable health conditions shouldn't need to be reviewed as frequently. That got general agreement.
Okay, that makes sense. Now, this link with universal credit seems like a really pivotal and complex shift. How are these PIP changes going to intertwine with universal credit? What does it mean for people trying to work?
This is, I think, the most fundamental structural reform they're proposing.
Yeah.
The biggest element is the plan to scrap the work capability assessment, the WCA, altogether.
Scrap it completely.
By when? By 2028-29, that's the plan. So that means the end of those categories people might know, like fit for work, limited capability for work, LCW, or limited capability for work and work-related activity, LCWRA.
Right, those labels determining work expectation.
Exactly. Those disappear. And crucially, in this new reformed system, the PIP assessment, remember, that focuses on your daily living and mobility needs that will become the single assessment for financial support related to health and disability.
The only assessment.
The only one. So your eligibility for the universal credit health element, that extra money for people with health conditions, will depend entirely on whether you receive any daily living award in PIP.
I see. So PIP becomes the gatekeeper for that extra UC support.
Precisely. The DWP says they want to decouple access to the health element in UC from work status. The hope, they say, is to reduce the fear people might have of losing benefits if they try to start or return to work.
Okay, so if I'm getting this right, it streamlines things by using one assessment, PIP, for both types of support. But what are the potential downsides? I mean, PIP and the old WCA were designed for different things, weren't they? PIP for living costs, WCA for work capability.
That's a really perceptive question, and it's a major point of concern for critics.
Right.
While the DWP frames it as simplification, critics argue exactly that. PIP assesses the extra costs of living with a disability, while the WCA assess capacity for work. Merging them risks overlooking specific work-related support needs, or, maybe conversely, pushing people into conversations about work when their primary need is support for just managing daily life.
And what about the money side? Are the actual payment amounts changing in universal credit?
Yes, there are significant financial adjustments coming, starting from April 2026. First, the Universal Credit Standard Allowance, the basic amount will go up by £7 per week for everyone, new and existing claimants.
Okay, a small increase there.
So for a single person over 25, it would rise from about £91 a week now to 98 a week in 2026-27. However, and this is a big however, for the Universal Credit Health element, the bit that replaces the old LCWRA payment, if you're already getting it by April 2026, your payment is basically ring-fenced. It gets frozen at its current rate, around £97 a week, until 2029-30.
Frozen, okay. But what about new claimants after that date?
That's where the big change is. If you're a new claimant needing that health element after April 2026, the rate is significantly reduced. It drops by £47 per week.
£47, so it goes from £97 down to...
Down to approximately £50 per week, almost halved.
Wow. That's a really stark difference between new and existing claimants, a clear signal there.
A very clear signal about the future value of that element for new claims, yes.
Yeah.
Now, they have proposed a protection. For those considered to have the most severe lifelong health conditions with no prospect of improvement and will never be able to work, the idea is they might get an additional premium and be exempt from future reassessments. But that specific measure is still under consideration. It's not definite yet.
Okay, something to watch. And you mentioned scrapping the WCA. What replaces it? You said something about support conversations. How will those work? And will people genuinely not be forced into jobs they aren't ready for?
Yes. The idea is that instead of the WCA, people will be invited to these support conversations.
Right.
They're intended to be delivered by, quote, appropriately trained staff. The focus is meant to be on your goals, what you want to achieve, rather than just focusing on what you can't do.
Sounds positive in theory.
And they're designed to be flexible format, timing, frequency. The DWP talks about a baseline expectation for most people getting the UC health element to participate in occasional chats about their aspirations and the help available. And, importantly, they have stated this is without being forced to look for or take jobs.
But, I sense a but.
Well, the but is that promise is somewhat tempered because they are currently consulting on whether attending these meetings should actually be mandatory.
Mandatory with potential sanctions.
With the potential for sanctions if you don't attend, yes.
Yeah.
So that introduces a bit of tension, doesn't it, between offering voluntary support and potentially enforcing participation.
It does. Is there any extra support being put in place alongside these conversations?
Yes. To support this new approach, the government is investing quite a bit, an additional £1 billion per year by 2029-30. This is going into a new Pathways to Work support offer.
Okay.
And this is based on evidence suggesting that this kind of support can work. For instance, they cited figures showing that additional work coach support made participants about a third more likely to be in work after 12 months.
Okay, so beyond these really big changes to PIP and universal credit, what else is outlined in these reform plans? Anything affecting specific groups or wider support systems?
Yes, the Green Paper does touch on a few other significant areas. For young people, there's something called a youth guarantee.
Youth guarantee. What's that involve?
The DWP is consulting on possibly delaying access to that universal credit health element until someone is 22 years old.
Delaying it. Why?
The idea, they say, is that any savings from that delay would be reinvested into specific work support and training opportunities tailored for that younger age group. The aim seems to be shifting the focus from immediate benefit receipt towards longer-term skills development for young people.
Right, an investment approach. Anything else for young people?
They're also consulting on raising the age people transition from Disability Living Allowance for Children, DLA, to PIP. Currently it's 16. They're proposing raising it to 18. The idea is to align it better with other key milestones like finishing education or leaving home, trying to make that transition into adulthood, and the adult benefit system a bit smoother and less disruptive.
Okay, that sounds like an attempt to streamline things for younger people. What about support for people already in work or trying to get into work? Anything there?
Yes, there's also a review underway for the Access to Work scheme.
Yes, access to work. Important scheme.
Very important, but the review notes it currently provides personalized support, but only reaches about 1% of the working disabled population.
Only 1%. That's tiny.
It is surprisingly low, so the consultation aims to find ways to expand its impact, make it reach more people, and also, crucially, better support employers in meeting their legal duties under the Equality Act 2010, things like making reasonable adjustments.
Right, because support for the individual is only half the battle, isn't it? Employers need to be equipped too.
Exactly. True support for employment relies on tackling those barriers and enabling employers to be more inclusive.
Anything else significant in the broader plans?
Yes, and this is quite important, I think. The DWP explicitly acknowledges an erosion of trust in its services.
They actually said that.
Yes, it's in the Green Paper. And because of that, they intend to introduce a new, published safeguarding approach.
Safeguarding, what does that mean in this context?
It involves a thorough review of all their current processes. They'll be working with stakeholders, charities, support groups, claimants themselves to clarify exactly what the public can expect from DWP staff. It also looks at how the department interacts with local councils, safeguarding agencies, health services. It's about rebuilding trust and improving transparency.
That sounds like a much-needed step, given some of the stories you hear.
Absolutely. It's vital for any welfare system to have that trust.
Okay, so we've covered a lot of ground. The rationale, the big PIP changes, the UC overhaul, other areas. What does this all mean for you, our listener, right now, especially if you're maybe already navigating the system or perhaps thinking about applying for PIP? What are the immediate practical steps or things to keep in mind?
Right, the practicalities. Well, if you find yourself needing to challenge a PIT decision, maybe you've been refused or given a lower award than you think is right, remember the process. First step is usually asking the DWP for what's called a mandatory reconsideration. That's where they look at their decision again internally. If they don't change their decision at that stage, then you can appeal to an independent tribunal.
And that tribunal is separate from the DWP.
Completely separate, yes.
Well,
It's a part of the court system, not the DWP. And here's something really important that people often don't realize. More than half of people who actually appeal their PIP decision win at the tribunal stage.
More than half. That's a high success rate.
It really is. So please, don't be deterred from appealing if you genuinely believe the decision was wrong.
That's really crucial advice.
Yeah.
So how does someone actually start that appeal process? What do they need?
Okay, to appeal, you'll need that letter from the DWP confirming their mandatory reconsideration decision. It's called the Mandatory Reconsideration Notice.
Right.
Then you need to fill in the appeal form, which is Form SSCS1. You can find that easily on the gov.uk website.
gov.uk, okay.
And you must send that form to HM Courts and Tribunal Service, not back to the DWP, within 1 month of the date on that mandatory reconsideration notice.
1 month deadline. Got it. Can you do it online?
Yes, you can submit the appeal online through gov.uk, or you can print the form and post it.
And any tips for sending documents?
Absolutely crucial tip. Whenever you send any documents, whether it's the appeal form itself or any supporting evidence later on, always use recorded delivery, or at the very least get proof of postage from the post office.
Why is that so important?
It just protects you. If the letter gets lost in the post, or if there's any dispute later about whether you met the deadline, you have proof of when you sent it. It can save a lot of hassle.
Makes sense. What does the tribunal actually look at?
The tribunal looks at your circumstances as they were at the time the DWP made the original decision you're appealing against. They base it on the law and the evidence available to them.
Okay.
One thing to be aware of, though, is that a tribunal can review your entire PIP award.
What do you mean?
Well, say you're appealing because you think you should have got the daily living component, but you were awarded the mobility component. The tribunal could look at the mobility part again as well and potentially decrease it, even though that wasn't what you're appealing about. It doesn't happen often, but it's possible.
Right, so there's a small risk there.
Small risk. So if you're unsure about appealing or worried about that aspect, it is always best to get some independent advice first. From an organization perhaps like Citizens Advice.
Good point. And when preparing the appeal itself, what kind of information is most helpful for the tribunal?
Specific, real-world examples. Don't just say, I have difficulty cooking. Explain how it affects you.
Like,
I can't lift heavy pans because of pain in my wrists, or I often burn myself because my concentration lapses, or preparing a meal takes me twice as long as someone without my condition and leaves me exhausted. Give concrete examples of how your condition actually impacts your daily life and mobility, even for tasks that might seem simple to others. That's what the tribunal needs to understand.
That's really helpful practical advice. Now, for anyone listening maybe feeling overwhelmed by these potential changes or just by the current application process itself, regardless of their nationality, as long as they have that qualifying right to reside here in the UK, where can they turn for immediate help?
Okay, this is really important.
Mhm.
We want to emphasize that free Hill LP and advice with completing PIP benefit applications successfully is available.
Free help? Where?
Yes, absolutely free. For you, as our listener, the best place to start is by heading over to our Facebook page. If you just search for us there, you'll find Pearl. She's our experienced in-house advisor, and she's ready to assist you.
Pearl on the Facebook page.
That's right. The link to our Facebook page will be right there in the description below this deep dive. Please do check it out if you need help.
Okay, free help via Pearl on the Facebook page, link in description. Are there other resources people should know about too?
Definitely. Don't forget other valuable resources. You can explore the Turn to Us Benefits Calculator and their grants search tool. You can find links via gov.uk. That can help you check for any other potential benefits or maybe one-off grants, money that doesn't need to be repaid.
Good tip.
And also, organizations like Scope offer fantastic free advice covering many areas of life for people with disabilities. They provide really valuable guidance to help navigate these complex systems. So there is support out there.
That's great to know. Free help via Facebook, Turn to Us, Scope. Excellent resources.
Mm.
Right. As we draw this deep dive to a close, perhaps a powerful thought to leave you, our listener, with, considering these, well, these monumental changes we've been discussing.
Yes, it's worth reflecting on this. The UN Committee on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities, in their review just this year, 2024, they described the UK's current system for claiming benefits as, quote, trauma-inducing.
Trauma-inducing, wow.
They even went so far as to accuse it of stirring up hostility against benefits claimants. That stark assessment really underscores the immense human stakes behind all these policy discussions we've been having. It highlights just how vitally important it is to get these reforms right, ensuring support is accessible, fair, and genuinely enables people to live independent lives.
A sobering perspective from the UN. So the question for you is, what questions do these proposed reforms raise for you about the future of support for independent living here in the UK? We really encourage you to seek out reliable information, use the resources mentioned, and get support as these changes continue to unfold.
Definitely.
That's our deep dive for today. We genuinely hope it's given you a clearer picture of these complex and truly vital reforms. Until next time, keep digging, keep learning.